You just never know where you're going to end up. Our guest today is a dentist turned pest control owner. Let's learn more about his journey. Welcome to the FieldFamous podcast, brought to you by Field Routes, a show that shines a light on the field service industry and the dedicated professionals that grind every day on their journey to success. I am your host, Dr. Christopher Fasano. Before we begin, I just want to remind you that the best way to get new episodes of the FieldFamous podcast is to subscribe on your favorite pod player, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find podcasts, you will find the FieldFamous podcast. The show is also available in video format. If you prefer to watch the video, you can go to YouTube and subscribe there. All of those links for everything that I just mentioned, you can find at befieldfamous.com. Last but not least, if you're really enjoying the show, please leave us a 5-star review. Our guest for today's show is Carl Braun, owner and CEO of Quality Pest Control. Carl Braun, are you ready to be field famous?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Chris.
All right, Carl. So Carl and I have a history together. Carl and I have worked together previously in another life before I got to where I am now. So I've known Carl for a little bit of time, and I continue to know Carl a little bit from a distance now, but know him and his business. So I'm happy to have you on, Carl. It's good to have a conversation with you again. We used to have these quite often. We don't get to do it too much anymore, so I appreciate you coming on. So I know Carl Braun, at least to the extent of the owner of Pest Control business. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience so they can get a sense for who you are and what you do, and then we can take it from there.
Sure, Chris. Once again, thanks for having me on. My name's Carl Braun. I'm the owner of, with my wife, the owner of Quality Pest Control in Omaha, Nebraska.
Now, wait, Carl, remind me this. Are you from out in the Midwest? Are you from Nebraska, born and raised, or you moved out there?
I call Nebraska my home. I was actually born in New Mexico, but raised in Nebraska.
Okay. All right. And raised from a very young boy, or you're okay. So schooling was in Nebraska.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And did you attend college, and where did you go? Did you go in state or no?
Yeah, I did. I attended University of Nebraska. My undergraduate studies were in biochemistry and microbiology, and I'm a graduate of the medical center in 1984 with a degree in dentistry, and I practiced for about 28 years and then stumbled into pest control.
Okay, so I forgot about this, Carl. Okay, so this is going to be a great conversation now. Tell me what it's like at a University of Nebraska football game.
Well, then it was 70,000 people. Now it's 90,000 plus screaming people. And most fans are rabid fans. We could be down 4 touchdowns with 3 minutes left, but we got the ball and we can still win. At least those were the old days. We've struggled the last couple of decades, but I think we're on to something new here. But certainly the football team is something that most people know Nebraska for.
It's a thing in Nebraska, though. It's a very much part of the DNA there.
100%.
Do you still go, Carl, or no?
Yeah, I go try to make a game every year.
Okay.
It's become much more commercialized, and now it's 90+ thousand in a stadium that was built eons ago, and you can just imagine some of the plumbing opportunities. We'll just leave it at that.
Oh, man. All right, so microbiology, you said biochemistry?
Yeah.
And so I was a biochemistry and molecular biology major. I took micro. What was your track knowing that you wanted to get into dentistry? So you just sort
Absolutely.
of premeditated it kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay. So you weren't a biochemistry fanatic and was really looking and loved it. And that's why you did like it.
Sorry for interrupting. Yeah, I mean, I embrace science. I mean, science is that's how my brain works. Some people read Shakespeare and I don't.
Same. I don't read Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I read it. I tried to read it. I tried to read it is the thing back in the day. But some people try to get through biochemistry and they can't. So I guess to each
That's
their
right.
own, right? Did
Indeed.
you have to take physical chemistry?
PChem, no. I did not have to do that.
I did. It was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I was saying, of all of my schooling, all the way up through PhD, the worst thing in the worst class was PChem. I'll never forget. So PChem is physical chemistry. I don't even know how to describe it to someone, Carl. It's it's where physics and organic chemistry mix, and I remember the professor, the first test, I think the average was like a 40 something. And I'm saying to myself, how can that be? How could you have a system where the average is 40? Either the professor is not good, or it's just way too advanced for the people taking it at the time. And that's sort of a known thing with PChem, so I struggled through. But you didn't have to do that.
No, that experience does describe my first go around with physics in college, though.
Yeah, physics was too. You need a certain mind for physics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have that mind.
And I will say this, for me, it's all about who the teacher is. And then, the expression is when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. Maybe there was a little bit of that going on too, but I was ready and anxious to learn and was blessed to have awesome professors.
Yeah, I think one of the things about a lot about scientists in general, so scientists that teach, sometimes, maybe most times, scientists teach because it's part of their contract. To be a researcher, you have to teach. You're not there primarily because you want to teach. And so what happens there is scientists also, not all of them, the most dynamic in their ability to converse and lead a room of young people to a place. So they're just sort of there. And if you have a physicist, you can imagine that kind of mind, and then you're asking them to teach basic physics to a bunch of 20-year-olds. So there's sometimes there could be a thing there. So dentistry, you practiced for how long?
About 28 years.
And you enjoyed it?
At first.
But
I don't want to knock too hard on that profession, but it became something that it wasn't. We were a few years behind our medical brothers, but the sellout to corporate dentistry it took away from the private practice aspect of it, and plus it was just time to move on. And I just tried to be retired, and
you just couldn't do it.
Nah. Couldn't do it.
So you didn't retire and then go into this. You had some time and then went into this. There was a break.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a break, and my wife and I had a conversation, and the dilemma that we faced was, do we sell our home, which is, we have a nice home out in the country with some land. Do we sell that and move to town, or do we buy a job that's not practicing dentistry? So we bought a job that happened to be a bug business, and funny thing happened, it grew.
So why pest? Why bugs?
Why pest? Well, first of all, the attraction was it was a job to go look at, and so we went to look at it, and the more I learned about it, I was fascinated by it. I really, if I would have known then, meaning back in 1978, what I know now, my career might have been completely different.
Really?
Yeah. This is such a fascinating industry, and it's fun to be a part of it.
So when you said the business was available, you found a business that was available to purchase? Is that how you got in? Okay. All right. Yeah. And you were evaluating all different types of businesses? You weren't just looking at pest control businesses?
No, we were just looking at again, we weren't looking at businesses to buy. We were looking at jobs to buy for a little while. So it was so let's get this and see how it goes. It's interesting, and so many times people will say, how can you make that leap from private practice dental to this? And really it's the same thing, only different. And how it's the same thing is we help our clients, just as we helped our patients, solve problems that are painful. It's just a different kind of a pain, and they can't do it themselves. So it's the same thing. You have to be in the people business to practice dentistry, and you have to be in the people business to be successful in pest management.
And there's also a recurring retention thing going on in dentistry. You want to keep your patients over the long term, right? And it's not just getting them in, but it's keeping there. So that's a similar model. So when you got in, where were you at the owner level from the beginning, Carl, or no? You just were part of a business working?
No. My wife and I purchased this, and right off the bat, it was mine. Okay. And my knowledge of pest control then consisted of a shoe and maybe a magnifying glass, reverting back to when I was 6 years old, and ants on the sidewalk. But we don't need to talk about that these days. But
But it's an interesting. It is a very scientific industry. There's a lot of science, right? We were talking about
100%.
biochemistry, which is chemicals, right? And the structure of molecules. You're using them every day. So
Absolutely.
that must have been cool as a scientist too, and part of an attraction to the business, right?
It really was. I mean, again, it's the best of both worlds. I mean, it's people, it's science, it's becoming a keen observer to figure out what the problem really is. Continue to refine, listening skills. I mean, what is your patient? What are your clients saying, and what are they saying that they're not saying? You know, so it's a very similar world.
So tell me a little bit about some of the early challenges you faced. So on this, a lot of people in the audience who are listening, they're either, they have a business of themselves, or maybe they're looking to start one, they're a tech or something, they're thinking about one day they want to do it. So we try to talk through your successes, your wins, your failures, the roadblocks. So tell me a little bit about when you jump into this new thing, what are some of the things immediately pop up that you're just like, whoa, okay, I gotta really take a look?
Well, one of the things that popped up right away was the gentleman that we purchased Quality Pest Control from had a very limited scope of service, and in fact, he ran his business from a flip phone, and you would get if the prospective client would call in, get a voicemail. Hi, thank you for calling. I don't do this, I don't do this, I don't do this, and I don't do that, and I don't do that. But if you still want to leave a message, do so. So, we didn't do a lot of things right off the bat. So the immediate challenge, I established a relationship with my supplier, and I still do business with that gentleman today. I asked him, what is the one thing I need to learn this year? And he advised me to go to bed bugs. And so I learned bed bugs. And then I just kind of made it a personal mission to achieve a certain level of excellence with a new pest every year. Okay. And then here
so
we are
you
today.
kept adding services to the portfolio, and that's really sort of how, okay. So you were growing your business by being able to accommodate more requests in the industry, in the space, which gave you a bigger audience to pull from. So I know this about you. I know that you're one to you're very involved in the industry. Tell me a little bit about how you feel that makes a difference in being a business owner in it. Like, I know that can sound obvious, but certain people just do it, and they on the periphery, if you will, of the industry. But you're in it. Tell me how much that's helped you in the game.
Well, I'm happy to share that with you and your listeners, Chris. At first, I would see these guys in the magazines, at the PCT and PMP and all of that, and I went to my first MPMA meeting, and I saw a gentleman, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't deserve to be in the same room and share the same oxygen that man does. Well, I got involved with NPMA through their executive leadership program, and became friends with a lot of these people that I just admired from afar. And the thing is, everybody had open arms, and this industry is so anxious to share and help mentor and help. There's plenty of business, and it's the spirit of I want to share, I want to help you grow, I want to teach you what was taught to me. Pay it forward is really strong.
Yeah.
So that's one of the really attractive things about this industry.
And you sometimes hence this show, the best way to learn is from hearing people that do it and hearing what right and seeing what's going on. So when you start, you begin the approach, you expand some of the service portfolio. What are some other things that you saw really start to work in terms of your growth, and that you started then you're finding it, right? It's like anything in growth, you find it and then you fuel it when you find it, and then you look for something else. So tell me a little bit about some other things that you noticed and that really sort of helped you go.
Well, one of the things that I noticed is Jerry had this irrational fear that someone like you, Chris, was in your mom's basement getting into his computer and stealing his money. So he wasn't on the internet, and he didn't believe in having a website, or even GPS. I introduced Jerry to the concept of GPS.
Okay.
Can you imagine doing a pest route with an atlas and
Wow.
trying to figure out where these locations are? So anyway, to get on the internet, and then I learned about search engine marketing and SEO and everything that goes along with that, and we kind of embraced that and evolved with that part of our industry. Yeah, I mean, that was probably the biggest next step that we took.
Embracing the switch, or the digital presence, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to that point, at first, you've heard this before, and I have anyway. I don't need all of that. I just need a web presence. And I quickly realized that the coolest website in the world doesn't matter if no one sees it.
Correct.
And so it's more about being seen and having a clear message and whatnot, and having a site that people want to stick around with. But I quickly learned the value of the marketing side of
Yep.
the internet.
By the way, you mentioned how do you do the routes without GPS. The other day, recently, I was talking to my son about pizza delivery, because I grew up as a pizza delivery guy. That's what I did, like in my time working when I was young, back home, or when I had time after in high school and I would have my license. And we didn't have GPS or smartphones. So there was a big map in the back of the pizza shop, and it was the grid maps with the coordinates. Mm-hmm. And someone would call in, and they'd be at 45 Hillside Ave, and you gotta find it, and then you gotta remember it or write it down, and you get in your car and you go out at night and you hope they have their lights on, and you gotta look for the number. And I tried explaining it to him, and he looked at me like, "Are you serious? Really? You really had to do that?" I said, "Yes, yes, kid. There wasn't a software or an app for everything back in those days. You really had to know where you were going." It's funny now that when I take him back home, because it's still family, we drive around. I know all the roads, and I'm like, it's because I was driving them all. I know exactly all the shortcuts. Tell me a little bit about a lot of things we talk about in this game. This is not just for pests, but it's in this sort of in field service, just in general, lawn. It'll apply. Your technicians, the people going out and doing the work. A lot of focus on them. When you're trying to grow and scale, you have to have people to do the work. You got to be able to deliver the goods. And there's a lot of talk in the industry about not only acquiring good talent, but really keeping them, especially through a seasonal business where cash flow can be up and down. So what have you learned there? And maybe you can share some of your experiences with that, because people always will ask, like, can you talk about those sorts of things? Because it's one of the things that really, really pains a lot of business owners.
Sure. A couple of things. First of all, knock wood, to date, I've never laid anyone off in the down season. So down season in Nebraska, it's basically December, January, and February, and even sometimes into March. So what did we do? We went after some commercial business that Jerry did not do, that the previous owner did not do. He hung up his B&G on Halloween and didn't pick it up again until March 1st. Okay. So we went after some different revenue streams, and I paid these guys. I mean, I paid them a minimal wage, not minimum wage, but a minimal wage. I paid them more than they would make getting unemployment, so it was worth their while to stay employed. And I mean, they had stuff to do. They didn't just sit around and watch paint dry. Right. So that I think was key. And then another thing that I think is pretty key is we've been blessed to kind of grow a pretty decent culture where people want to be a part of what we're doing. And once we get people through the door and get them over their training, they don't want to leave. And again, part of that is they get paid in the wintertime, and it's just a good place to work.
I mean, again, this is one of these obvious statements, but I've heard that it obviously matters if you want to be at the place and you're in a place where you feel like you mean something, because when you get that bug, and no pun intended, you get that bug in your head, like maybe I should go, or maybe I should look for something else. It will pull you back if you really feel like the environment is a place that because I could go somewhere else, but I won't have all of this. So that does matter, right? It does really matter to provide an environment where someone feels like they can actually make a difference and matter.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And part of that, I think, is myself and my two manager parts of my business. I mean, we're approachable, and it's when it's time for feedback, it's 360 degrees. You know, I mean, it's a safe place to say, I didn't like that, and here's why, and how can we work through that? Just as, hey, that was great. Let's do more of that. You know.
What about the acquiring of like new talent? Like if you have to go out and look, or you're hiring, or you need to find, or in your previous, what are some avenues that you've looked at or that you found to be a little more successful, or how you know, what are some strategies that you use that you find work?
Well, that, my friend, is the $10,000,
It
the
is.
$100,000 question
I know
today.
you have the winning answer for everyone,
Yeah.
Carl. Right?
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I don't know if everyone would agree. From the technician side, it's just been persistence, you know, and going through a few interviewees, and you know, we've made a couple of bad hires along the way, and they're quick to weed themselves out if they don't fit. I've been on a particularly painstaking journey to get inside salespeople. And so finally, I came to the conclusion that this is taking too much of my time, and I'm getting the same results. So just recently, I went to a recruiter and hired them to help. And actually, just right before this podcast, I interviewed one of the most awesome people I've ever talked to, and we're going to bring him on board. So some people cringe at the thought of paying somebody to help you, but then again, what's your time worth, right?
Right. It's like time is money, right? It's that. But I
Yeah.
also, too, I've had this conversation with people. It's that you get to a point where you have to recognize, like, okay, I need something else. This isn't working for me. I got to try something else, right? Like, you know, like you
Right.
said, like, you got to be able to do that in life and business. Otherwise, you're going to not only just waste your time, but in the end, you spend more money going around in circles, and circles don't ever get you anywhere. So maybe recruiters isn't the best option up front, but if you get to a point where you're not having any success, you shouldn't just wholesale say, I'll never do that, is what we're saying.
Yeah, never say never, and be selective. I mean, do your due diligence and find a good recruiter, not just any recruiter,
Right.
because not all are the same.
And you must find that if you can, like you talked about, if you can promote an environment that where people want to thrive and be, I imagine you'll get more referrals, like from techs. Like people might ask or recommend friends or buddies, like, this is a place you want to be a part of. Have you seen that happen?
Yeah. Actually, 50% of my technician force was
Is
by
that way?
referral. Yeah.
See, yeah. And again, I guess if they didn't like where they were working, they probably wouldn't recommend or ask their buddies, you should come join. I mean, I would imagine. I don't know, but
I'd say that's a fair assumption.
now, what about some of the stumbling blocks along the way, Carl? I mean, it must not have been a perfect jog down the street, right? I imagine you hit a curb every once in a while, or a couple rocks in your shoe. So tell us a little bit about some of those, because you know, people are going to be, they're traveling down a road. It's not the same one as yours, but there's similarities. So what are some things you stumbled on?
Okay, for some things that I personally stumbled on, are probably some of my own shortcomings, and that is, I tried to do too much myself, and was a little bit behind the ball when it came time to swing and make the hit as far as delegation. I didn't want to, I felt like I could do more, and here's an example of how that played out. I used to do my own bookkeeping. Again, I mean, when we started out, I did everything just like Jerry did. Well, I was doing sales tax reporting at 4:00 in the morning on a Saturday morning one day, and I said, "This is the dumbest thing in the world. You need to hire a bookkeeper," you know. And so I did, and that was a stumbling block. And just like letting go of certain things and trusting in that other people are trained to do it. And once that train leaves the station and starts to get a little bit of momentum, it gets easier to do, for sure. And you have to trust the people around you, and it goes back to making good hires in the first place.
Yep. Now that you have a business, it's running, it has grown. What tell me a little bit about what your goals are for the future of the business. Where do you hope you don't have to tell me in terms of real numbers. Just tell me about, like, in strategic mind, or what you're thinking in your life. Are you looking to have this forever? Are you looking to grow it to sell? And the reason why I'm asking is because, a lot of people that have shops or have businesses have different things in mind. Some people want to keep it in its legacy business. They want to pass it through. Other people are looking to, grow it and sell it and make a multiple and exit. And the strategy could, if one or the other, how you run the business and grow it, it might be different depending on the outcome of what you're doing or where you want to go. So tell us a little bit about what you're thinking in terms of your business.
Well, when we started, the plan was that we would grow it and then ultimately pass it on to family. That doesn't look like it's going to pan out. So at some point, and what that point is, I have no idea, but at some point, first of all, I guess part of that depends on the cards that life deals you.
Sure, of course.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
But
like everything else. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, there will be a point that I do pass it along. I mean, exit and what that looks like, I'm not sure yet.
In some way,
yeah,
right.
in some way.
Yeah. And regardless of which way that goes, you're going to run the business the same way you are. Good business, growing, things like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to alter how you approach the day to day.
Not at all. Okay. Not at all. We're far from perfect. Make no mistake. I mean, we're far from perfect. Every day is a learning experience. We learn something every day. If not, what did I miss? Kind of a thing. But we're just going to keep on keeping on, trying to do the right thing, and hopefully we'll continue to have the growth that we've had. I mean, it's life is good.
I want to ask you about a particular scenario in this business, particular pest control, but again, it's applicable in other businesses like this where there's recurring revenue streams or a one-time service. One of the things that I always had to deal with in marketing for pest control companies and these companies is trying to convince or convey that pest control or this sort of service, a control service, is not something that you just want to do once. You want to be preventative about it. You want to be proactive about it. I always akin it to, like, people have heard me use the analogy of it's like a physical for your home. It's best to go get it, keep up on it. You don't want the problem to appear, and then you have a real problem. And it's much harder to fix the problem when you got a problem. You much rather keep it under control and monitor it. And that was a difficult thing to articulate and sell. As we move to recurring revenue as the number one thing. So I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about your experience and how you, because I know you have recurring revenue and I know that's a driver. How did you approach that with your prospects and your staff in trying to make sure you were appropriately balancing getting people into a plan, but also accommodating the one times when you went or when you need to?
Well, to get to where we are now, it has been a journey. One of the things, as you're well aware of, that's occurred over the last few years, I mean, the cost of acquiring a client has just exponentially exploded. I mean, the cost per lead is crazy. So to do a one-time service, it's not profitable. In fact, oftentimes it's a loss leader. So one of the things that we've done is we've charged a whole lot more for that one-time service, and then make it more attractive to roll it into a bundle. So, for instance, are you going to pay full price today, or do you want a $50 discount? And then we can just keep this up for a minimal for X dollars a month, and then you'll never have these problems again. You know, and that works for some, and some people choose to pay the higher fee, and it's enough of a fee that at least we're not taking too much of a bath on it. So
right. And what about those one-time customers? I don't know if you've specifically looked at this. Do you find that, yes, you come in, they're one time, you don't make as much on them, but now they're there. Now you have them in the database. Do you find that they reactivate and possibly become another time service, or you get them in as a recurring because they just become a prospect pool for you and you don't have to acquire them again, if you will?
The answer to that is yes on both fronts. A lot of folks just want us to come out once a year. And with our software, it's easy to track. We try to be proactive now instead of wait for them to call. It's Mr. Fasano. You called this last year about those ants. Would you like to get that scheduled now? That kind of a thing. And yeah, they're in our database, and this is a place where we're headed with using our software to help us market to those, proactively market to those people that are in our database. I mean, I've heard some crazy numbers. People claim that there's all kinds of value in just sitting in your data, in clients that you have.
Yeah, and so really, it's interesting. What you're doing is you're creating a recurring service out of the one time, if you will. Right. That's what you're doing. You're making
recurring
it
annual service.
Correct. It's a recurring annual service, right? Mm-hmm. Not recurring that it automatically goes, but recurring that you're going to get them to commit to doing it every year when you call them. Hey, your time is up, and that's actually an interesting marketing strategy to speak to them like it's now time, rather than do you want to come? Do you want it? Right.
My philosophy when it comes to sales in general, it's not an invitation. We're not inviting you to buy. We're persuading you, for lack of a better word. The objective is to have our clients want what we know that they need, and as far as being proactive with the annual services, it's Omaha's a spread out community, and in terms of route density, it's a lot easier to have that one-time service fit on a route rather than have it come on a Saturday where it's 40 miles away from anything.
Yep. And then last thing is. So a business that has recurring model, and they then increase their share of recurring revenue, and that's good. Success, check. I have recurring money and revenue coming in. It alleviates some of the cash flow issues, check. Now the next hurdle and problem is keeping them, right? Keeping them in pest control, and particular possibly in lawn too. Once the lawn gets nice and green, and once the house is rid of bugs, I don't need you anymore, Carl, because the bugs are gone. So why am I going to keep paying you when I don't have a problem? The value you provided just gave that customer an exit to stop paying you. Do you run into that? And talk a little bit about some retention tactics that you're trying to use to keep people.
The answer to that is yes, and some people are just going to leave. You can't retain them all. One of the things that we talk about over and over and over to our especially our field people, our service specialists, and even on the phone. Every time we get the opportunity, we want to resell the value of our service to our client, because they, like you said, all my bugs are gone. That's great for the first few months, and then they're never there again. That's because we're doing our job.
Right.
But it's good to remind them. And then another thing that I wanted to mention earlier, but I skipped over it as far as keeping people in the wintertime, we've gone to a monthly budget plan for payments. So that evens out our cash flow and makes it a lot easier to keep our guys in the wintertime. But anyway, the monthly payment plan, we sometimes we have to talk about that. Why am I paying you? You're not coming out. Well, that's your budget payment. You're paying for pest insurance. In fact, we are doing pest control because we have you set up for success with your rodent control. We've done the exclusion that you needed. I mean, you don't have bugs, you don't have pests, you don't have mice.
Right.
So that's how that works out for us.
It's kind of like the energy companies do this, I think, where it's like rather than because in the winter in the Northeast, I'm sure where you are, you use a lot of heat. So your costs will go up. Then when you stop using the heat, the costs come down, and you have like a low bill. Then the summer comes, people start using their air conditioning. So rather than doing that, they put you on a budget. Where they will flatten you out, and you're paying every month a little bit more on those than the shoulder months, but never as high as the peak months. And it's a way to normalize the cost, because what people I think really want is they want a predictable. It's good to know, et cetera, what I have to pay. So it's a similar idea, right? Where you're for you too, you're getting cash flow that you're going to get a little more consistently.
And another good thing about that, or another thing that we try to do as a part of that, is set it and forget it. Get a credit card on file, and it's just it just becomes something that people don't think about, you know? I mean, it's just there. It's kind of like my cell phone bill or my Netflix or whatever, you know, I just, it happens and I don't even think about it.
And that's what
and
you
there's
want,
nothing
right?
nefarious about that.
No, it's nothing about that. No, you've done your job, right? That means you're doing your job, and they're whatever. So the last thing we'll leave everybody with is, let's do this. I invite you to give, you're up on stage, you're giving a talk to a bunch of budding professionals in the space, in pest, a home service, a field service, and they're getting going, and you're there, and you only have a few minutes, and you're there, and you can tell them a very quick few things that you learned about this business that they should focus on right now as they begin or as they're getting going in their growth. What are some of those things, or one of those things that you're there in those 2 minutes?
Well, first of all, give some thought to where you want to be in 10 years. And then in 5 years, where do I have to be in 5 years to be where I want to be in 10 years? Yep. And then in 3 years, and then what do I need to do in 6 months? What do I need to do next week? But be clear about your vision and be true to that. Yep. And have a plan. I mean, if you don't have a plan, I mean, if you don't have a place to go, how are you going to know when you get there? Number one. And it is hard work. You know, you work hard and you'll be rewarded. I had to smile. I was talking with a gentleman who's in home services as well. He recently added pest to his lineup of service offerings, but he said pest control is the best get rich slow thing that he's ever heard of. and you know, we don't have, you know, $25,000 ticket items, but by the same token, if you do a good job and work hard, you'll have loyal clients that love you, and it's rewarding altruistically, and it's also rewarding financially. I mean, if you build it, they will come.
It builds over time. Yeah. That's the key. It builds over time. All right. Well, to close, I'm going to give you we're going to do a quick rapid fire. I do X or Y, and you pick the one that resonates most with you. It's fun. It's very simple. You'll.
Oh boy.
Here we go. So you can't think. You can't think. You just got to answer. That's what makes it fun. So this is our version with Carl Braun, Quality Pest Control. You ready?
Hope so.
You're going to be ready because I'm going to go anyway. Here we go. You ready? All right.
Yeah.
Text or talk?
Talk.
Dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
Oh, dark chocolate all the way.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Summer or winter?
Fall.
Morning. I love fall too. Morning or evening?
Evening.
Salty or sweet?
Salty.
Do you have a nickname?
Me? No.
Would you
I'm
rather?
Sure I do.
That you don't know about? That
Yeah.
People call you? Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to talk to animals?
Ooh, probably talk to animals.
Most people say that. How long does it take you to get ready in the morning?
About 40 minutes.
40 minutes. Scale of 1 to 10, how good of a driver are you? 10's the best.
Probably a 9.
Invisibility or super strength?
Super strength.
Rats or mice?
Mice.
Bees or wasps?
Bees.
Everyone loves the bees. Is this podcast the best podcast you've ever appeared on?
It is.
Is it the only one?
No, it's not, actually.
All right, so
I've been on 3 of them.
We win. Nice work. All right, everybody. So I want to thank Carl for coming on the show. Just remind everyone, go to BeFieldFamous.com. You can find more information about field routes, about the podcast. Tell your friends, subscribe on Apple Podcasts. And remember, your success is fame-worthy, so come tell your story. Carl, appreciate it, man. Good talking with you.
Appreciate you, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.